I know you all have heard a number of great ideas about prevention, violence prevention programming, and you would love to keep the conversations going, and that is great. But we have to continue with our program. Um, right now, we want to put your minds to the process of how to go about getting the funding for these great programs that you've heard so much about. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring back Dr. Kenny Steinman, and he's going to help us put all of those tools together to write a fantastic grant so you can get the money.
All right, thank you, Sharon. I was actually hoping you were going to introduce me and I could hear what I'd done since this morning. You know, make the bio a little bit more. All right. Right. I know, that's fine. All right, so it's all about the Benjamins, right? So all right, so anyway, so what we thought, the planning group thought would be helpful is to walk through how we're envisioning people writing these grant proposals. We recognize that some people in the room have a lot of experience writing grants, others have none, and that's okay. And in fact, one of the purposes of this whole grant program is to build the capacity of agencies like yours to write grants. And so if this is the first time writing a grant, great. This is exactly the kind of program that we're excited to do. And hopefully this training will help you towards that end. Specific to this grant, but also for grants in general. What I'll ask you to do is, if there is one of the handouts you have that's not particularly helpful and has a blank back to it, turn it over, and we'll because we're going to talk a little bit about a logic model, which appears nowhere in the grant proposal itself, but which I have found is a useful way to organize your thinking and can help you lay out the grant itself. And so no need to write anything down yet, but but you might be interested in starting to sketch out, here's what I want to do, and here's what I think is why it's happening, the factors I can identify, and here's what my program's going to do to address those factors, and here's how my budget's going to address the program, et cetera. So keep that program out and start to jot down as you feel like you're interested. And if not, you can make a funny picture of me. So the boys were talking, they decided I looked the most like Larry of the Three Stooges, which makes me worried. All right. Okay, so where are we going? These are the headings of the grant, except for this one, which we'll talk about. And that's what we're going to be talking about now. So this is sort of walking you through the grant process. Now, as you'll hear from Christine and Teresa in a little bit about in this whole grant process for this particular program, the first thing you do is not write a grant, is write a letter of intent. Saying, here's without taking the time to write a whole grant, here's a quick one-page sketch of here's kind of what I want to do, and here's who's going to do it, and here's why it's important, and here's where we're going to do it. And then the HealthPath Foundation of Ohio will look at those and say, these ones look good, and this one's totally off base, and so we're going to say, never mind, don't bother. And then we'll say, please submit a full proposal. So I'm going to talk about the full proposal, but it's also very relevant to the letter of intent. In fact, if you look in the background here, you can't quite see it, but the letter of intent, it says in the grant application that you have in your folders, the letter of intent should describe the types of family violence and the target populations your project will address, the specific factors contributing to family violence that you hope your project will influence. That's part of the letter of intent and also part of what we're going to talk about in the background and significance section. Does everyone have a copy of the grant proposal packet? All right, I'm assuming they do. Okay, nod. Work with me, thank you. All right, when we talk about the approach, the letter of intent, we're going to ask you just a description of your approach, including what you will do and who, when, and where you will do it. So when we talk about approach in this, that's relevant to that part of the letter of intent. We talk about organizational capacity. We're not asking in the letter of intent for you to talk about how great your agency or your staff but just a description of any other community partners who will a description of how any other will collaborate on the project with you. And then we will talk a little bit about, we're asking for some evidence, a summary of any evidence that suggests your approach will have the intended influence on the factors you identify. And lastly, a budget, just a statement of the project's approximate cost. We're not going to expect much, just a quick line in the letter of intent about how much you think this is going to cost. If it's $5 million, good luck with that. But that's what we're going to talk about. Most of what I'm talking about is in the context of the grant, but it's absolutely relevant to the letter of intent too. Does this look familiar? It's sort of like, okay, we talked a little bit about it this morning, very simple model. What I'm going to suggest for right now, what we're asking for in this grant is actually to just kind of ignore this. Thankfully, HealthPath Foundation knows that family violence is common, consequential, changeable. So they won't worry about the consequences. We're not asking you to make a case that, yes, child maltreatment is important and you should fund it. That said, a lot of times, and what we hope with family violence, the programming that you're doing, especially around prevention, a lot of the time you may have to go after other sources of funding that are not specific to family violence, in which case, yeah, you're going to have to make a case that elder abuse or IPV or whatever issue your agency wants to address is really common, consequential, and compelling. For right now, we're not going to worry about it. And so what we're going to talk about, a logic model, this is the latter half, the left half of what you just saw. Does that make sense? So the consequences are here. What we called risk factors before, we'll call contributing factors here. And what I'm going to do, I mentioned this before, is talk about, here's the problem. There's a very complex ways in which, factors that influence family violence, whether it's child maltreatment, IPV, what have you. You can't address everything. You can't address everything. I know it's complicated. But what we want you to do is choose carefully, thoughtfully, 2, 3, 4 contributing factors that influence this, that you think you can change. We're not expecting you in, Clark County. It's on the brain right now. I don't think I've ever even been to Springfield. We don't expect you to change domestic violence in Clark County, but that maybe there's some things that contribute to it that you can change for $5,000 in 1 year. And so that's what we're looking at. You'll have a bunch of your program will probably have a couple things you're trying to do. And so which of those will try to address which of these factors? And finally, for the budget, okay, what are you going to do? Where's the money going to go to address which of these components, which will then address which of these factors? So this is trying to logically kind of map out where we're going. That's what I hope you'll start to sketch out on your own. And we'll talk about each of these to organize our thinking around developing a grant proposal. Okay. Just in terms of labels, talk about, this is what we kind of talk, some people have different terms for this. If you heard it differently, I'm sorry. Has anyone ever used the logic model before? Wow, okay, good. I know you have. So there's about the same as number of people who wear bicycle helmets, so it's good. Coincidence? So impact, these are what we'll call outcomes or contributing factors. The process that we use, and rather the inputs, what we're going to do to get the process to get the outcomes. Okay? Isn't this exciting? We're in sort of the Death Valley right now of the conference. I got a long drive, and I just want to go. All right. I have to go to the supermarket after this, so just so feel my pain. All right. Okay, so let's start talking about each of these. Background, significance. What we want to do, this is the key to everything, is come up with a concrete, specific problem statement. What's the problem? And what's the population that you're going to be, that's experiencing this problem, that you're hoping ultimately to address? And that in terms of defining the problem, needs to be specific and measurable. Now, there's a little bit of flexibility in here in terms of exactly how specific, but in general, I'm going to encourage everyone to really try to drill down and to think about exactly what it is that you're going to be doing. The broader it is, the more likely it is to be vague and poorly defined. And just because your program, let's say, is focused on when, let's say, people in same-sex relationships experiencing domestic violence, it doesn't mean that others can't benefit from the program. It's going to be helpful to have a specific focus, and you can recognize that others may benefit, but that I'm going to encourage people to really have a thoughtful focus on what exactly their $5,000 is going to be doing. Also, to define the population. Again, who is going to be experiencing this? Where do they live? Do they work? What have you? So here's a couple of examples. So this program will reduce, might be too vague to say domestic violence, because that's obviously a big catch-all. Maybe dating violence might be a bit more specific. Or child maltreatment, is that too broad? Do we want to focus specifically on child neglect? Do we want to focus on child sexual abuse, someone had mentioned before? There's a variety of different, obviously these different types of family violence. Yes, a lot of the efforts you're doing are interested in increasing awareness in general, but I'm going to encourage you to think thoughtfully, carefully about whether you can narrow that a little bit, make it a little bit more specific, because again, there's not a lot of money, and it might be more helpful for you to think more carefully about doing a better job in a narrow area rather than becoming too broad. We can talk about elder maltreatment. Maybe want to focus within this particular type, financial exploitation of elders, or something else. So I'm saying perhaps too vague because I recognize in some situations you might want to keep it broad, but I'm gonna guess that in general, people that have a more focused problem that they've really thought narrowed down are going to be more able to develop responses to that are more focused as well and more compelling, frankly, in the end. It makes for a cleaner, more direct program. So we talked about the problem, now also the population. Is it too vague to say teens in Southeast Ohio? Are you going to be dealing with, migrant laborers? Are you going to deal, maybe it might be more specific to say 10th to 12th graders in Scioto County, if that's where you are. Though that's, I guess, more south central than southeast, but I'm getting there. Talking about children in our county, maybe children ages 0 to 3 in our county. Rather than women in our county, community dwelling seniors in Canton. Anyone here from? Yay. All right, and this was back to you. I changed this about an hour ago. Low-income women, ages 35 to 64 in Xenia. That's you, but that's, but that might be someone that I put Xenia here. It had been Lima, but Donna's, I picked on her enough already. So, so again, encouraging you to think carefully, and not that these are the only people who can benefit from your program, but being thoughtful about, most of the people who are getting legal advocacy tend not to be, I'm just making this up, but tend not to be young women in their early 20s, but rather tends to be older women who are maybe in marriage relationships. And so and that's who we want to focus on. Or we're not talking about all seniors, those in nursing homes, assisted living, but rather those who are living in the community, or those maybe specifically in rental properties, or a way to narrow the population, narrow the focus. Not that that's the only people who can benefit from your program, but focusing the problem and the population may result in a more compelling story and a grant that you're trying to do. You stop there. Questions, comments, blowback? All right. Yeah? Okay, let's go. So, contributing factors. Now, what causes family violence? We're going to walk through this piece by piece. Just kidding. No. I know, God, this stuff's complex. It's hard, and it's, there's so many different factors that contribute to family violence. How can we possibly, it's cyclical, and the consequences become risk factors, and it's all very, very difficult, and it's so complicated, and you're absolutely right. But this is why I left academia. No, to some extent, we can talk about this and tweak it 1,000 ways, but it's still never going to be perfect. And so what I want you to do is think about keeping things simple. I think there's Edmund, I can't do everything, but I can do something. You can't possibly address all of these issues, but maybe there's some factors that really do contribute to the problem, but that you can change for $5,000. And maybe there's a way to address those that's going to actually be, you can measure and then you can show the HealthPath Foundation, this is what I said I was going to do, and I tried it, and guess what? It didn't work, but this part of it did. And so that's OK. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is for those factors, those contributing factors, pick, we said 2 to 4. More than 4, especially for this paltry amount of money, you're going to spread yourself to, come on, it's $5,000. It's important. I'm joking, but they are taking the lead. It's $5,000. How much do you expect them to do? 5 contributing factors? That's $1,000 a factor. All right. It's not a lot of money. I know, but it's something. You wouldn't be here if it was, $50. So it is something. But it's not a lot. And so what can we realistically do? These factors should every single one of them should have 3 characteristics. They should be important. That is, they should be related to the problem, relevant. They should be changeable, that this money can actually change. And there's different ways to think about how these can change. It could be, you know what, I'm going to define my population narrowly. I'm going to do safe dates, and I'm going to do it in 2 high schools. And I'm really going to expect to see kids in those high schools who are attending it, their knowledge and attitudes are going to change. Most of the kids in the county, though, their attitudes aren't going to change. Not yet. But for my project, this is what I want to be able to do. So I'm going to make a pretty big change in a relatively small number of people. Or I could take the same amount of money and try to have a small change in a lot of people. I was talking about this, and this is the beauties of public health, these small changes in huge populations. Like the media campaigns like brain on drugs, eggs, the side of bacon, whatever. I was talking about my 14-year-old who, like all good 14-year-olds, is very skeptical about everything. And says, how can those things actually work? And I say, well, let's actually think, because remember, these are shown to lots of people. Yeah, but they're so silly. I mean, they do anything? And I say, well, OK, let's do a thought experiment here. Let's say 1 million people see this advertisement to not use drugs. He said, I'd never use drugs. He said that. So this is still silly. OK, let's say 1 million people see this. Let's say 1 million kids your age see this. 750,000 of them aren't interested in it, totally irrelevant. There's maybe 250,000 kids might actually see this and are kind of maybe in the realm of might want to use drugs. 100,000 of them are going to use drugs no matter what. So they're really into it. This is silly. Then there's this other 150,000 who might or might not. And 150,000, 90% of them aren't really thinking about it now. They just happen to watch this and not really paying attention. But there were a couple thousand of them who were actually recently just offered drugs for the first time. So maybe there's 3,000 kids. And they're thinking about, and maybe of those, a quarter of them are about to go to the same party with the same kids. And they're thinking about whether they should use it. So all of a sudden, even though we're narrowed it down, we're down to like a couple thousand kids for whom this is a relevant message exactly at the right time. And so even though it's a really small, it's a small change, if you apply it across a larger number of people, some people are actually going to benefit from it if you get them in the right. So that's sort of the rationale for these broad media campaigns. And they can be, and you say, oh, OK, well, it made sense to him. Hopefully it makes sense to you. I'm seeing Christine's nodding. That's a good sign. So there's some value. So recognizing $5,000, as generous a sum as it is, can only do so much. That it's, think about that these should be factors that you could actually change. Questioning gender stereotypes among high schools, great, but you're not going to do it for everyone in Columbiana County. But you might do it for a couple high school classes. So let's frame it that way. Measurable. Think about, and this is something you don't have to articulate in the grant proposal itself, something that for those that are funded, HealthPath will work with you on. How can you measure whether you're going to have this change? And so that's something to keep in mind. So each of these should be important, changeable, and measurable. OK, so let's walk through this a little bit, this how it works. So we have this problem. We've talked about these contributing factors. This is, we have these program components and these inputs. And so we've talked about framing the problem and the population here. So this is sort of the background. We've just talked about the contributing factors. These are what you're going to try to focus on. Remember that complex graph, there's all these things happening, but you're only going to pick 2, or maybe 3. Or if you're really stretching yourself thin, 4. But think about what you could realistically, which of the 2 factors might be related to this, but that you can realistically change. Okay, so your approach. So what are you going to actually do? Well, the approach, this is sort of the nuts and bolts to some extent of the proposal. So what do you want to do? And you've had some great roundtable sessions where you've gotten hopefully some ideas about opportunities and things that you could do. And one of the things that in describing this, remember, you're convinced, but you need to show people that what it is you want to do. Be specific, exactly what you're going to do, who you're going to do it with, and we'll talk about why. And that whatever you're doing, proposing to do, must link to all. There must be some sort of link to all of the, You have these programs, there should be an arrow from each of these going to at least one of these. If you're planning to do something, but it doesn't really relate to the contributing factors, get rid of it. It's not part of your program. So think about what of these contributing factors you might want to do. Or if you really are set on safe dates or a particular program, think about what are the outcomes that you can realistically change, and whether there's some other components that you might want to do to help support those changes as well. And lastly, we'll talk about evidence. So give me, show me, don't tell me what what you're doing is actually going to have some sort of effect on these outcomes. So what we want to do in describing this approach to keep it specific, as Elmer Fudd would say, is to write process objectives. These are specifying what are some of the measurable activities that if you put down on paper, you can show Teresa, Christine, yes, I'm doing what I said I was going to do. I don't know if I'm going to change gender stereotypes. I don't know if I'm going to increase bank tellers' awareness of financial exploitation of elders, but I know that we had the training and that this many people showed up. And I know that they were satisfied with the training. Or I know that we placed posters in this many places. So these are what we call process objectives, ways for you to measure what you're doing, not the effect of it, not how effective it, but just what you're doing. And so what we want to do is in each of these process objectives, need to kind of the old journalism article, who, what, where, when, why. The why comes later, but say who, what, where, when, by when. So for instance, here's an example of an outstanding process objective that I wrote. It's beautiful. It's poetry. Okay, so between May 1st and May 15th, 2013, project staff will display at least one poster on financial elder abuse at 35 bank branches in Trumbull, where's Cindy, and Mahoning counties. Where's Dottie? Okay. So so do we have the who? Yes, project staff. That's who's going to do it. Do we have the what? Yeah, we're going to display at least one poster. Do we have where? Yes, in 35 bank branches in Trumbull, Mahoning counties. By when? Yes, we have. So it's all. It's not that long, but that's a specific, concrete, specific example of what you're going to do. Okay, now, just to be sure, and to their credit, the HealthPath folks put their own objectives now these are actually, I realize this is a bit bass-ackwards, but these are outcome objectives, because this is what the whole project was trying to do. You'll see that by December 31st, 2012, why are we all here? What's this group? And this is in the proposal itself on the front page if you look at it. By this date, we're going to enable 50 organizations, that's you all, and others, that serve communities in the HealthPath service area to write grant proposals for projects using best and promising practices. So this is sort of who's doing it, the organizations, when, why, et cetera. But these are sort of more the outcomes rather than how we're going to do it. But a lot of these are similar. So we talked about the who, what, where, writing these process objectives that are specific and focused and sufficient detail so a grantor is going to say, oh, I see exactly what Suparna is going to do. I understand that. But what we still need to do is link it to one of these contributing factors that you said you were going to influence. This is what we sort of can call the program theory, the theory of your program. How is your program going to eventually address child maltreatment or elder abuse? Well, it's going to increase bank tellers' awareness of financial exploitation of elders, and that in turn will have some small contribution to reducing financial exploitation of elders in our community. So here's the beautiful process objective we had before, but now it also specifically links it to a contributing factor. So just between May 1st and 15th, project staff will display at least one poster on financial elder abuse at 35 bank branches in Trumbull and Mahoning counties. This will address bank tellers' limited awareness of elder financial exploitation. So boom, boom, very, very succinct and clear about what you're doing and why, or when and how and why you're doing it. Here's Mahoning County. I missed you. So again, so now you see why we have these contributing factors and how they're linked. We have the components and how they're linked to the contributing factors. And wanted to talk about evidence, because the evidence here, the evidence is in the lines. We ask you in the grant proposal, not so much in the letter of intent, a little bit, but in the grant proposal, the evidence comes in these lines, at least here and here. Why do you think that this contributing factor is associated with this outcome, the problem, sorry? Why do you think that your program is going to address that contributing factor? What evidence do you have? Don't just show me, tell me. Don't just tell me, show me. So for instance, let's look at some examples. Show me, don't just tell me. There's different ways in which we can get evidence. Let me stop for a second. I have a list up here, but has anyone used, like, what kind of things do people reference when they're trying? I'm sure you've done this to some extent already. What do you do when you're trying to reference a study? What are some studies that you found useful, or reports, or other sources that you found useful to make a case for your kind of programs? Can you give me an example? Demographic information? Okay, I'm going to push you further. Thank you for opening your mouth. But I'm going to say, okay, let's actually push a little further. Say, for your program, what kind of work would you do? Okay, so what kind of how do you know what you're doing works? I'm sorry.
We track it to see, the outcomes.
Okay, so you track it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you start doing this program anyways? Was someone else doing it, or were you the first ones?
We were actually, I started the program in Allen and Putnam
counties.
counties.
Great, okay, so you started this program. Is there someone else who has a program that they didn't start, that they sort of taken from somebody else? Yes, can we, thank you for being brave. Okay.
We're recording it. So
I'm sorry. It's a parent training program.
Okay, parent training.
Built off a model from another parent training program, but it's for teenage mothers. And we just used evidence-based outcome research. And I just, gathered as much as I could on other research that has been done on that program and developed it from there.
Right, and so has anyone ever written, let's say, research shows that, and you kind of say research shows that that this program works, that what we're going to ask you to do is think about, and we recognize a lot of people don't have the time or the resources to be able to find all these research studies easily. Yes, we can send you to the CDC website, but frankly that takes time to sort through, and you may find it's kind of overwhelming. What do I do, and how do I narrow this down? So that we recognize there's different ways, different types of evidence people might use in building a case for their program, for showing HealthPath that their approach is indeed going to address the contributing factors that you've identified. Sorry, that you're going to show. Okay. So research studies, like the ones I write, are certainly one site, but frankly, a lot of people, that's pretty highfalutin literature to sort through, and it can be tough. There's also awards and nominations. There is, for instance, the U.S. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, SAMHSA, has a registry, Mental Health Services Administration. Am I got it right? Okay. Thank you. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, has a registry of evidence-based programs that they say, okay, here's programs that have been rigorously evaluated and they seem to work. So that's a kind of nomination. You can say, hey, Safe Dates is listed on there. So that's evidence, without you citing a study, that it's something that may actually be an evidence-based approach. There's also agency reports. Anyone ever write a report? Yeah, we all do. And so does anyone ever looked at any report 5 years old? Not too often. Well, Christine, okay. So yeah, a lot of these reports are kind of done and they're shelved and that's that. Yes? That could, absolutely. It could be a community needs assessment. We identified 5 years ago, we realized that there were a lot of seniors in, where are we?
Deaf people in Ohio.
Deaf people in Ohio, okay. So across the deaf community in Ohio, we recognize there are a lot of people, deaf people who were not being served, and so no one ever did anything about it. Guess what? We're referencing that to say, here's what we may need to do. And that here in, I said Illinois before, Kentucky, I'm just making something up, where people have done something similar or that we're proposing to do now. So what you want to do is sometimes finding who's done something similar to what you're interested in doing and asking them, hey, do you guys have any reports you ever wrote up? You ever do any evaluation? Even if it's not very rigorous, it's okay. It's some sort of evidence to say, Louisville, Kentucky did something similar and they found such and such, and you can cite their little internal agency report. It was never published, but that's okay. What we're trying to do is get people to show the grant reviewers that you're interested in looking at evidence and not just telling us that, yes, this program works. Other people have done it, trust me. And lastly, if you feel like there's no place it's done anything, there's personal communication. My wife says I need to work on that, but that's a joke. 16 years. But we have, in which case you can find an expert, someone who would be recognized as an authority in this area, or someone who's seen a lot of programs and would know, Kristen, I'm looking at you, a lot about this, and to say, so-and-so found that this approach is really very worthwhile, and you can even include a verbatim quote from them, and then say, personal communication. Teresa Wukasik, HealthPath Foundation of Ohio. I always like this because anyone from Missouri? Anyone know anyone in Missouri? Anyone been to St. Louis? All right. No, Missouri is known as the show me state. I forget why, but it's sort of, so the show me state. So whenever you see a Missouri license plate from now on, think about evidence-based. Show me, don't tell me. Don't just tell me that your program works. Show me that it works. Give me something to hang a hat on. Is there a research study that suggests that, yes, Safe Dates works? Yes, there are. Is there a research study that suggests Second Step works? Yes, there are. Is there an agency report that shows that building I-teams may help improve communication, organize, not foster networks and coalitions, spectrum of prevention? There's a research study? It's not really. There's some, but not a whole lot. But there's an agency report, which we can point to from Trumbull County, where we found that they did it and they had a lot of success with it. And so cite that if you want to propose doing an I-team. Oops, sorry, that's... Yes?
I would add to that, again, part of the intent of the roundtable sessions today was to give you all an opportunity to learn about some of the best practice programs that are being implemented. And in that case, you could ask the folks that were the presenters, they can provide this information for you rather than trying to dig through and doing a lot of research yourself. So we're trying to make it easy for you. So, connect with those folks. And if you're interested, we'll provide a roster of everyone that attended so that you have contact information and you can do some of that networking on your own. And again, organizations like the Ohio Domestic Violence Network is a wonderful resource, and they can help you with that also. So use one another, because we don't, a lot of that work has already been done, and it's not our intent for this paltry amount of money for you to spend a lot of time doing research, because a lot of that work has been done. So connect with your peers, and I think they'll be able to help you with that if you don't have it already.
Excellent point. Well said. No, I think it's actually great. And that's actually one of the value of fostering networks, including meetings like this, is you know each other, hopefully you've met someone new, but that also you're all applying for the same grant. Ooh, should be competitive. Well, yes, perhaps, but that also we're trying to do two things. One is enable you to get this grant or get experience writing grants, but also to do a better job writing grants in general. So when you're going out beyond the family violence world, there's other sources that you can do more effectively. You can apply for more effectively. And if you're interested in Second Step or a program in the deaf community, and you met someone else who was doing something similar, and you realize you want to replicate, you can ask them, hey, do you have any I need to show people, not just tell them that this isn't a good approach. Do you have any references that can help me build a case for why this actually works? That's what makes for a much more compelling story than just, trust me, it works. I know. So we talked about that. Now, organizational capacity, this is pretty quick. A lot of the time, this is, I don't know how to describe this fairly, but for these types of grants, often we just want to make sure that people sort of know what they're doing. Every now and then you'll get someone who's sort of a fly-by-night independent consultant who's sort of, who the heck is this? And why does he want our money? And you're not really sure. So it's sort of a litmus test to say, okay, are the people responsible for implementing the program well qualified? Do they have any experience doing something like this before? How long have they been working at this agency? Do they have a college degree in something relevant? I wouldn't worry too much about this, but you do need to this is more of a yes/no question. It's more something that can ding you rather than make it very exciting. I mean, a lot of you all are probably here because you're very well qualified. I would guess that every single person in this room would be a yes for this. I think it's fair to say that we want to, tend to give people a benefit of the doubt. But we just know that the grant reviewers will look if someone's coming in out of left field and they have no background, you don't know what their agency is, you can't see why they're doing this, then that might be a question that would be raised. Similarly, the applicant agency, is it well suited? Does it have any experience doing something like this? It does say that the agency should have some experience doing kind of family violence prevention. And lastly, and this is more important, this is less obvious, does the applicant agency make the best possible use of collaborative partners? Collaboration is hard, I think. You know that. And it takes time and energy. But one of the things that we're always talking about is leverage. Leverage. What other assets can we leverage? We want to give this generous sum of money to, but we also want to see, well, what else can we get? Can we get any matching funds? Or is there someone else in the community who wants to meet us halfway and say, we'd love to do this. You want to do it we can get some money from the HealthPath Foundation. Hey, Verizon or whomever, or whatever local, foundation, corporate entity, whatever, would you want to help join us in expanding this program that we're starting with the $5,000 to do it in more schools or to do it in other ways? If you don't do that, it's okay, but that there may be, one of the questions is, well, there's some obvious partners that they could have worked with. Someone who'd be willing to donate meeting space, someone who'd be willing to donate some staff time, a person who would be, let's say, the local FCFC that might have somebody who has some expertise in media to do like a little bit of a media campaign to reach out to some of the local media outlets and advertise what you're doing. So that there's ways you can pretty cheaply, building on your existing professional relationships locally, bring in some other partners and make a much more compelling case to HealthPath, saying, hey, I'm going to do this, and yeah, you're going to have to pay me, but I'm also going to bring in some other people who are going to be donating their time, so the total value of the project is more than just the $5,000 you're giving me. And so that's a compelling case. People, I think, like to see that. Questions or comments? Getting punchy? Okay. You sure that's iced tea? All right, good. All right, so what we'll want to do, but again, to be specific about these collaborative partners, who are they and exactly what will they contribute? And we can look at that in the budget section. So, and we'll get to some examples in a bit. How to list evidence. So we ask you for evidence. Remember, the evidence is in the lines. So give me some evidence that says that these factors are really associated with this, this problem. Give me some evidence that the program that you're proposing really can influence these factors. How do you list it? Again, show, don't tell. Rather than just say research shows research, there's a little superscript 1. And people know how to do that on Word, and so yeah. It's just a nice, quick way of sort of making a footnote and saying, okay, insert footnote, and put it at the bottom of the page. Here's the research that shows. Don't just tell me that the research shows. Show me, give me some citations. And in the, I won't go over it here, but in the proposal, it gives you a couple examples, how to cite a book, how to cite an article. I don't think we're particularly concerned with the format, but I think what we do want to get, we do expect, and it's a reasonable expectation, and also get you in the habit of doing, is citing. Putting those footnotes in, showing people why the research that you're talking about. And typically a citation includes like an author's or agency's name, the year, the place of publication. For this particular grant proposal, it's really helpful if you can include a link. Beauty of today, we can do that. And often, I've been in other grant reviews at the federal level where they require that all of the citations you have, typically in journal articles, have a web link. And they will actually go through, you can click on the proposal itself and it'll take you right to those references. And you can see if the articles really say what people claim they are, the claims that they're making. Usually they do. For your purposes, it's not gonna, I don't think we're gonna be doing that. But I think but again, we're trying to build into your practice, your habits, the idea that cite includes some evidence. Now, there's not all, and we'll look at some examples in a little bit, ways that you can include those citations. Honestly, I don't think anyone's going to follow up with them. We're not going to try to track down in East Liverpool the Columbiana County agency report from 1978, but it's there. We'll trust you. Okay. In terms of the budget, so we talked about the problem, contributing factors, these program components. Now we're back here. Okay, now I have to spell it in a budget. What's going where? Who's going to pay for what? The Community Connections Grant Program. I could have put HealthPath. I wasn't sure. Getting punchy. Actually, I had an experience on a review panel once, back when LGBT was not known as an acronym, and someone would say, like, what does lymphogenetic hormone have to do with this? And they were going on and on. And I was like, what kind of population is that? And I'm like, it's okay. So we're past that now. So here are the funds from this program, the big $5,000. And that's, it might go to all the program components, it might be not. We're asking HealthPath to fund these pieces of it, and someone else is going to donate this. In this little model here, it says, oh, we're going to highlight this, and someone else is going to donate or is going to provide some other funds for this piece of it here. And so that's, again, this goes nowhere in the proposal, but it's helpful to start to organize your thinking about what's the problem you want to do, what are some of the factors you think you could actually change, and then what are the program components that are going to change which of those factors? Questions or comments? All right. Little word. Okay, so we talked about this. In terms of in the budget itself, we talk about being specific. Again, what monies go to which components. How many people here have written like budgets before? Yeah, well, okay. You all need to start wearing bicycle helmets, I'll say that much, because that was a lot more than, okay. So you all know that most of the budgets often go to personnel. That's okay, but that recognize also the budget, a staff person's time that might be devoted to this project Also think about how that's going to be split up again, around the different activities as well. It's for your own consideration. And again, a lot of, as you know, and I know, it's going to be really hard to shake loose any money from anyone these days, especially for this project, but that consider in-kind donations. So someone's going to be hosting the meetings for your group, that's a donation, unless it's your own organization. Someone else is going to be help you with a media campaign. That's the kind of, some of their time could be considered a donation. And so think about, and if possible, monetize, give a dollar figure associated with that. That said, understand that some organizations sometimes are reluctant to have you list their time or something as an in-kind donation, because then technically they have to then justify why they're donating time to your project. And so sometimes for people who are very scrupulous about accounting, it gets a little tricky, but I'll leave that to you to handle. Okay, so that's sort of an overview about how to think about pulling together these proposals. And I want to give some examples because I think that'll be a bit richer in terms of what might be some examples of how to walk through them. And then we'll look at the sample proposal, which you have in your handouts already, which is brilliant. Now, okay, so here's an example of what we're trying to, the evolved problem will be less child abuse and neglect. Maybe that's a little too vague. So we could question that. Among which population? We haven't really said. This is just a quick sketch. What might be some contributing factors? Community awareness of the problem locally, or the lack of community awareness. People don't think it's a problem in, give me somewhere else. Give me a county we haven't had yet today. Green, we had Green. Stark. We had Stark. Preble, thank you. All right. How's Indiana? Still next? Not slipping away? Okay. So in Preble County, people don't think it's much of a problem here. We need to build awareness that it's here in Preble County. We're going to use the county profiles to show that here in Preble County, here's what a credible OSU estimate has as being the number of kids each year who experience abuse and neglect in Preble County. Here's what the community belief that the problem can be prevented. It's not just, well, it happens and there's not much we can do, but we're trying to change these now in communities that have these beliefs that really are high. Do they have less child abuse and neglect? Maybe, maybe not. We need to make some kind of case that these are related. Not in the letter of intent so much, but in the proposal, if we can find other examples where someone has claimed that these factors have some kind of contribution, however small, to this problem, you're showing, you're not just telling, that this is a good connection. So what do we do? What are some things pinwheels for prevention? Anyone familiar with that? I think it was one of the, would be something we could, is this evidence-based? Is it promising? I mean, you could make a case, though, that it has been used widely. And so one of the ways to claim, well, how do we know that pinwheels for prevention in a central location, and sorry, what's the county seat in Preble? Sorry? Eaton, sorry, okay. I don't know. If we, in front of the, county courthouse or what have you, at pinwheels for prevention or some central location, we can build community awareness of the problem. We can have a ribbon campaign on child abuse on a specific day. We can have endorsements from mayors, et cetera. Now, is this evidence-based? Not exactly. Is it promising? Is it really? Yeah, you could